morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and welcome to the weekly analysis, where we are going to be looking at the data when it comes to PvP, which specializations are performing, which ones are struggling, and why that may be the case. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So we're going to be looking at every single role from both US and EU in order to see what exactly is going on with all of these specializations. So let's take a quick look at the range DPS for North America. This is the top 5,000 players. So the bigger the graph is, the more people in the top 5,000 that are succeeding on that specialization in that bracket. And we can see that Beast Mastery Hunter has actually overtaken the #1 position. And to me, Beast Mastery Hunter is the best specialization for a beginner, a newcomer, and apparently a pro level player, which is probably why they decided to hit it with a little 5% nerf on this upcoming reset for Tuesday. And when we look at Europe, it's actually the same deal. Beast Mastery Hunter has taken over in both regions, which is pretty surprising because usually there are some differences between them. But BM Hunter looks like the spec to be, basically, because it's easy, strong results, good representation, and overall popularity, which is surprising because it's not really a burst class, and its durability is not exceedingly high. It's just got great sustain damage, which can show you getting a class into a position where your sustain damage is in a good spot. You can be a phenomenal spec. Frost Mage is still the #2 overall most represented, which is surprising to me given how many hunters there are. I didn't expect either Fire or Frost to be this high, but Fire is starting to fall off pretty heavily since the most recent nerfs. We don't see any changes to Frost Mage with this coming reset. We also don't see any changes to Marksmanship Hunter, which would be one of its main difficulties, as well as Beast Mastery Hunter. I think likely these kind of go hand in hand. Frost Mage with Frost Nova and Ring of Frost can actually crowd control a lot of the Beast Mastery Hunter pets, and I think most notably Ray of Frost having 2 charges of it and just being like this Kamehameha that 100-0s people is likely the main reason we're seeing Frost Mage with such high representation when it comes to solo play. And I think in Europe it looked the same as well, although even more mages over in Europe. You guys really like your mages over there on that side of the pond. The third specialization for North America, the first divergence that we see between the regions, is Marksmanship Hunter. It didn't receive any changes. I was surprised. I was kind of expecting them to nerf the cooldowns, buff the sustain with this one, because some of these specializations, they just do so much. It's the same thing with Frost Mage, right? All the damage is in Ray, all the damage is in Volley and True Shot with the instant aim shot window. I was kind of hoping that they would shift some of that damage. They decided to shift damage, but on different specs. This is one that I think would have benefited from it as far as like the game as a whole. People who play Marksman Hunter, who get CC'd in that window and the line of sighted, nothing happens, versus people who don't know to do that and instantly die. It's a very jarring experience between the two of them, but Marks is obviously a really good go-to here, and it's not getting nerfed. Fire Mage fell quite a bit. It seems like it was the most hit with the nerfs that came in on this most recent reset as far as its damage in the combustion window. I think with Hunters increasingly getting higher, I think also with Enhancement Shaman increasingly getting higher are likely main contributing factors to that, but it's still really healthy even despite the nerfs. So this is why I like the approach of small nerfs every week to kind of get a spec more in line. Don't just like KO it and then it ends up down here. And then everything can kind of just even out. The same thing with what they're doing with BM Hunter, bringing it down a little bit, although we don't see anything towards Frost Mage at this period in time. And then in Europe, though, Fire Mage is a lot more popular, overtaking that marksmanship position. Now, what comes to be surprising here is the Warlocks are actually doing still so well, because every time I've seen a Warlock, they get absolutely mowed down by Windwalker monks. Like they got squished by the Indiana Jones ball rolling down the hill when he lifted the artifact. It's just like they get rolled over, and they're still doing pretty healthy here with Destruction and Demonology Warlock in this position. And these guys will likely benefit the most with the reset, given that Windwalker is one of your main counters, and they got nerfed pretty significantly. So you do at least have that to look forward to with the reset. So you guys are probably doing even better next week, but still in a solid spot. Devastation Evoker is a great pick again for newcomers, but it's just hard countered by Subtlety Rogues. Subtlety Rogues are getting a little bit of a slap on the wrist, much the same with Fire Mage. So, eventually it might get into that threshold position where, just get absolutely rolled over by the Subtlety Rogues that, when we looked at the melee DPS, are probably having a pretty high amount of representation. When we go over to Europe, Devastation Evoker is actually significantly below everybody else. So you guys like your complicated specs, okay? You don't like your simple specs, it seems, over in Europe. But I think anywhere in this range is like you're like decently healthy. Like you can compete at any period in the game. But obviously, Dev Evoker, I think, gets better results even if you're not as good at it. So if you're somebody who's newer or you don't have a lot of time to practice, like Dev Evoker, BM Hunter will give you much better results. Boomkin, still in a healthy spot. I do think for new players, it's lacking a little bit of defense, but if you master its defense and its kiting and its timings, you can definitely make it work. Burst is a little bit on the low end, I think, is also why it's not tailing towards up here. If it had a little bit more damage than Star Surge, I could see it pushing into this territory. And I don't think it's going to see a huge amount of benefit, honestly, with the changes that are coming through here, because Assassination Rogue is one of your biggest counters. So if Assassination Rogue does manage to come into play with the changes that come through, you will probably struggle. Affliction Warlock is also a great challenge for you. I don't know if the Affliction buffs are going to be enough for it to come into play, but Boomkin will likely sit somewhere kind of just in the mid-range, I think, at this period. Ellie Shaman in Europe seems to have much more positive sentiment. You can see it actually like right on the heels of the Warlocks, towards the top end of the mid, or just directly in the mid, I guess. But in North America, not so much. I think that it's okay, but much like Boomkin, it's like missing that little bit of an edge compared to some of these top end specs. They just have so much KO damage in their cooldown windows, which honestly probably means these guys are just well balanced and well designed. And then the specs up here have some sort of burst window that's just like exceedingly high, which is why they're towards the top end. Ignoring BM Hunter, you guys just absolutely truck people. Devourer Demon Hunter, I'm a bit uncertain with where it's going to go, because it's still actually in a decent spot, even despite being countered by rogues, not having great defense. It's still honestly in a solid spot as far as representation in the top 5,000. So with the armor increases that are coming forward to, it could do better, but they're nerfing its burst. And I don't know if the sustain is buffed enough. It's one of those things where it's like, I like that they nerfed the burst. I like that they're buffing the sustain, but if they nerf your burst by too much and don't buff your sustain by enough, you end up like Affliction Lock, where now your Soul Harvest doesn't do enough damage to win the game and your dots still don't do anything, so you can't kill anything. So I am worried about you falling in that spot if your Collapsing Star doesn't do enough damage after the changes. And the defense increase is targeted at armor. So, the thing that killed you was Subtlety Rogue, which again will affect Eviscerate, but it won't affect all the shadow damage components. And they have talents that convert things to shadow damage. So it's not really, it'll help you with Marksman Hunter too, I suppose. And Outlaw Rogues and Fury Warriors and Warriors in general. But Rogue might still be a little bit of a problem. I do think the direction is good, but I don't know if the numbers will be enough to put it in a spot where I don't think it's going to go up all the way up here. It'll probably stay still close to the same, maybe fall a little bit depending on its finishing power. Shadow Priest, a lot of people in the comment sections were just like, why didn't they buff Shadow Priest? Why didn't they buff Shadow Priest? Shadow Priest, to me, it's durable enough to survive to the point where its dot damage becomes more relevant. And I think the issue for Shadow Priest is that it doesn't fit in this kind of like Fist Weaver, melee, Rogue Mage Burst meta. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't have a spot at the moment, unfortunately, and they didn't nerf Fist Weaver. So you're still good, like you can still compete, but I don't know if you'll feel like you're in the top upper side of things when it comes to representation. And Affliction Warlock is still holding on here. Like when we look at Europe and North America, like Shadow starts creeping up a bit higher, but Affliction I expected to be even smaller than this, because it feels like a lot of pad damage. It's really annoying. A lot of your damage is hard to get out, and it's easily countered, just dispelled immediately. Decurse, all these mechanics, you just get locked out. It's just, I feel like Affliction has been such a struggle bus, and it's still holding on like this. So maybe the buffs that they're getting, the 12% damage, the 25% I think on UA as well, maybe. Like they need enough damage that they can get into the BM Hunter territory as far as sustained damage, and maybe we'll see dots again. I would actually like to see dots again, because it's been many years since we've seen dots. Arcane Mage, lowest representation. I think it's the hardest to actually pull off out of all of the specs in the game, even with the simplifications. Affliction's in a similar spot. I feel like these guys are still the hardest to pull off for a newcomer, whereas with Subtlety Rogue, when we look at the graphs, like it jumped all the way up because they did nail it as far as making it more accessible. These guys are still a little bit too hard on the hard side, maybe too many mechanics on them. The Arcanosphere one-shot, again, I don't know if that's the best way of getting a spec to increase its representation. Maybe they just think Arcane's always been that cheesy meme one-shot thingy, and they want it to be the Omega Shenron again. I don't know. We'll have to see if anybody decides to actually start picking that up or not. I would imagine with no nerfs to Marksmanship Hunter, that's probably unlikely. I think that it'll still be tough for you. And then Og, some guys are still managing to do it. 4 of you are getting into the top 5,000 on this guy. But it seems like Og is pretty much just like survive on your own out there in the wilderness with that. So some similarities between the regions as far as range DPS, and some obvious like pinpoints here in data as to why they made some changes, but then some other points seemingly completely missed. So we'll have to see how that plays out. When we look at melee DPS, Ret Paladin is still trending towards the top. The changes that were applied to them pretty much completely offset, and the Divine Hammer window from their Templar tree is still able to get killing blows with burst, which is the main reason they're up here. So you guys will still be up here likely even after all the changes that are coming in again. Subtlety Rogue, look at this. Like Subtlety Rogue used to be down here with Outlaw because it used to be very niche. Like you had to play the one specific way. It's very hard to play. Now look at that. Really high representation jumped up. So I feel like this is what their goal was for a lot of those like lower populated specs that were really, really hard to play, was to have this type of graph happen for them. And they've been kind of very light with the nerfs on it. For Subtlety Rogue, maybe they want Mistweaver and Subtlety Rogue meta. I don't know. That could be the case. Sometimes you could do that as a designer if you wanted to be like, we want this meta to be meta defined, and then maybe they'll shift it halfway or next season. Who knows? But it is still getting slight nerfs, so maybe it'll be in a worse spot. Windwalker is the one that I think is getting nerfed the most out of everything. So this one could shift, and unlike Rogue and Ret, it doesn't have the utility so much to carry itself. It needs its damage to be in that type of position. Warrior has some decent utility, but the loss of damage here is probably going to be felt the most. So I'm interested to see what our weekly analysis looks like next week. When we look at the European top 3, it's the same thing, if not even more, just top heavy towards those specs specifically. But this guy could be the most likely on the chopping block. On Holy DK, we don't see any changes, but nerfs to Windwalker and nerfs to Warrior are buffs to you. So I could see Unholy creeping back up on this graph pretty rapidly. Just because of that. Those are the main things that counter you. Also, if Affliction Lock does randomly start to see play, you like seeing Affliction Lock. DK is completely countering that. So if that does happen, you will be very happy. I'm not 100% sold on that. Arms Warrior, I'm very concerned about. Much like Devourer, like that Demolish window with the one shot was like your main win condition. It got nerfed very heavily, which it probably should. Again, like I think that's the right direction. Go after that, and then buff the sustained damage on the specs. However, they didn't nerf the burst significantly on a lot of these top performers. It didn't touch anything on Ret. And then the things that they buffed on Warrior, like Deep Wounds, which is great. I love the bleeds to do damage again. They're only accounting for like 2 to 3% of your overall damage. So 100% buff is like a 3% increase overall. So I don't know if that's going to compensate enough if you lose your kill condition window completely. We will have to kind of wait and see how that plays out. Enhancement Shaman is still in a great spot. I think it's still got really good sustain with Tempest builds, and it's to get the one shot during the totemic window. It's got great synergy with Fistweaver. It's always been like that. Whenever those two specs are good, we see that come together. I can remember the Legion BlizzCons where it was like Fistweaver Enhance X, and everybody was running that as a setup. We might be just entering that type of meta again, especially with the tournament coming up next week. Curious to see if they do changes between them. This was the last patch note update that they said they would do, and then I think it was going to get more infrequent from here unless it was too egregious. So maybe if the tournament is just like 100% this guy and it's very obvious, then maybe we'll see something. If not, then well, we'll kind of have to wait and see how it plays out. Havoc Demon Hunter, I'm surprised it's honestly doing this well. Much the same as when we looked at the range DPS, because like you're hard countered by Sub Rogue. You don't like this Ret Paladin, Windwalker, Mark's Burst type of meta. So like you are just waiting, bro. I swear Havoc is just waiting for the day that it gets to rise. And enough slaps on the wrists or any of these guys get tripped up, and I feel like Havoc, maybe it just shoots up every bracket. And then when we look at those from Europe, very similar line of representation between the regions, almost identical actually. Fury Warriors is still in a good spot, even despite the nerfs, I think, to the High Mountain Tree. Still really good. Frost DK, look, you guys are all the way down here, but anytime you get a PvE buff, they never let you keep it in PvP. Never not even a little bit of it, not even just like a little sprinkle of it. They don't let you keep any of it. So you guys must have sniped a Blizzard dev in 3v3 or something and one shot him as Frosty K. He's like, nope, that spec is never getting buffed, because like you just look at the chart and you're just like, Unholy seems is so much significantly better. You can't let a little bit of a little buff get through sometimes. They're not going to happen. Again, just Feast or Famine, play with Dev Evokers, Windwalker Monks. You're going to feel good in those positions. Outside of that, I think Unholy is still just more consistent. Feral Druid, again, very hard to play. This is decent representation for it, for how complicated it still remains even after the changes, which did make it easier, but it's still probably close to the hardest melee to play. It's still doing this is, I feel like, pretty reasonable for how complicated it is, and that it doesn't have like that big burst one shot in a meta right now where it's all about that. So Feral, much like Havoc, is kind of just waiting. It's kind of just biding its time, depending on if we see any meta shifts. But if we don't, again, in a tournament, maybe we're not going to see a huge amount of it. But on ladder, you can definitely still make it work. Survival Hunter, again, you guys just don't have the same oomph. They took all your oomph away. You guys had your boomstick before. No boomstick for you. Marksman Hunter, okay if they one shot. Survival Hunter, no. It's different rules for you. Different rules for you. You know, it's like that dating meme where the boss CEO walks in, rich CEO walks in and flirts, and the girl's like, oh, I like this, and then the kind of just like underling comes in and flirts like, yeah, where's HR? Survival Hunter, you guys aren't the CEO, okay? Unfortunately. And then Assassination Rogue, you guys did actually get pretty significant buffs, which I do think is good. You guys were really struggling, and it's hard respect to pull off. So Assassination Rogue might have some opportunities here to come through. Only issue is that you are very squishy. These guys absolutely KO you, if not kind of hard counter you in a lot of positions. So you may still struggle, but I do like that it got a lot of attention. And Outlaw got a lot of attention. This guy is like, oh my god, bro, this guy is just waiting to overtake the game, I swear. I'm going to play more of mine because I played it like a couple days ago and I didn't even have a lot of gear. And I was like, my god, this is actually a lot of fun. It's really good. It's hard to play, though, still. The Roll the Bones, I wish showed up on the personal resource display. I don't know why it doesn't show up on the UI there. Same thing with like tank mitigation when it's tank mitig plus. Why does Iron Fur not show up on the personal resource display above it so you can see when it's up? A lot of that stuff, I don't know why it disappeared from that. I don't know why the personal resource display broke, but that would be awesome if it showed up there to be able to track that because that was the most complicated buff to play with. Although they did nerf your cooldown. Again, which is just so weird because Outlaw Rogue is like, no one's playing it, but they nerfed your cooldown, buffed your sustain. But then these guys at the top, it's like, no nerf on the Divine Hammer Burst, no buff to the sustain, like no trade-off. So a little bit weird. Again, if you don't have that big pop of damage, maybe it doesn't end up going that high up, but it has been feeling pretty good to me though, regardless. So let's look at the healers now. Actually, let's look at you just to make sure it's literally the same graph. That's actually mind-boggling. Usually there's some differences. Healer, I think, is maybe going to be where there could be the most difference from top to bottom, but this looks pretty much close to where I was anticipating. Monk is still towards the top. I think the casted Mistweaver was the most affected by nerfs. It does actually feel manageable to deal with, especially in solo environments. But Fistweaver, especially in 3v3 or tournament level play, is just remarkably good when you get a good comp with high synergy. Discipline Priest is still very high. I think the Void Weaver spec, people really like that for solo play because you get a fast Q as a healer. You do as much DPS as DPS. So it's basically like instant Q DPS gameplay right there. And Disc Priest is always really high whenever it's viable. It's just really fun. Blasts a lot of damage. Holy Pally is still doing well, and it's getting buffs. So that Eternal Flame buff could be really nice for you come Tuesday. I don't know if it's enough to flip this script here with Mistweaver, but you'll still be in a really good spot. Holy Priest is the best healer just to play if you're beginner, and it's still in a really good spot. I think it's just a really good pick 'em up healer with straightforward. They pruned it down much like Sub Rogue, and it's very basic. Restoration Druid did not climb nearly as much as I was anticipating it with the changes that came through. I think its main issue is that it still just kind of falls over to a gust of wind, and then you fall over. That's the main issue with it, and I think it's also pretty hard. It's probably the most mechanically demanding healer now with how Soul of the Forest works and how integral it is with your rejuvenations and how much you have to shapeshift. Like it's got a lot going on. So it's very hard and it's very easy to punish. But if you play at the top level, it can feel really cool to pull off with the changes that came through. But I've found my frustration is when I feel like some random guy just rolls up on me and like just looks at me and I die sometimes. So that is the main downside. And I could see a tournament play like an RMP just rocking your world, or a Fistweaver or Melee Cleaver just rocking your world. So maybe we won't see it at tournament level. Prez Evoker is still trending towards the bottom, I think, because of Subtlety Rogue. It's still very like team dependent, limited ranged compared to a lot of other healers without a huge benefit to it. The damage output from these guys is just so much higher than you two, which is something you used to have, but I don't know how you're going to compete against the Fistweaver or the Void Weaver. The Weavers are just absolutely dominating. And then Resto Shaman got that little bit of a 20% direct healing buff, which is still not like, it would be good if we weren't in a meta where you just die before a healing wave before you can even think about casting a healing wave, let alone the cast finishes, and you die. If it wasn't like that, it would likely be noticeable. But I think with how the meta is currently paced, that buff, it would be nice, but I don't know if it will shift too much, unfortunately. So this is kind of where the chips have fallen at this point in time. I think now with the tournament that will be the last say on like what happens here, and we'll see when the changes roll out next week if this graph starts shifting more, because I feel like there is some excitement for Druid. Druid could likely start climbing up. I don't know if it was enough excitement for Shaman, and then obviously Mistweaver didn't see any nerfs, so I don't see these guys logging off their monks. But when we look at Europe, basically the same graph, except Holy Priest jumps up a little bit, Disc Priest jumps up a little bit, down from Mistweaver. In the healer balance, it's so close, man. I just feel like it's like the game is so close to being like really good. Just bring the cooldown damage down a little bit, rebalance the healers a little bit after that, I feel like it's just like I'm just like staring behind glass, just yelling like you're so close. It's so close to being so good. Please, it's so close. Just one more, please. And I don't know if it's gonna happen. Just feels like it's so close. I'm excited. Regardless of that, I've been having fun with the game, but I just feel like it's so close to being perfect. I just want it to be perfect. So I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown, the weekly analysis. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.